about you can't give a band success if they ain't any good.
That's right.
You can, or you could way back. You could kind of fudge it. You could have the Milli Vanilli scenario. You could have that kind of crap going on where you lip sync to a backing track and all that bullshit, But you still have to have the ingredients to work on, and build around to create such a thing. Now, Maiden's body of work is classic. It's it started off with Iron Maiden album Killers, and then on from there, and classic songwriting, great performance. That when people go, I want to go see that band. I've heard they're good. I've heard their album. I want to see that live, and they come and see it, and they go, wait a minute, that's better live than the album.
That's right.
Or they play that slower on the record, but I like it faster, or whatever. And then they see the show, and they get in. Iron Maiden we've always put on a show for us. Yeah.
With us today on the path here, in mid-sentence and mid-story, is the famous drummer from Iron Maiden, Nicko McBrain. Now,
hello, everybody. We've been having a big old natter before we got to see you.
Yeah, I'm getting my golf lesson from Niko. And like many, I've met Niko through golf. And to get a job doing that at 9 or 10, how did you get motivated to take a job at such a young age?
It's working class background, mum and dad, always encouraged me to go out and get a bit, they gave us pocket money, a couple of bob a week, but my dad was always encouraging me to kind of work, encouraged me to be independent, work for myself, don't be lazy, get out there and, go and earn a couple of bob, son. I'm not gonna keep giving you money. Go and get your own. And his friend, it started with a friend of his said, "Oh, he can clean my car. I'll give him 5 bob." 5 shillings, which was probably then like a half a dollar, which is, in the 60s was, actually
a lot of money.
Yeah, late 50s
for a little kid.
Yeah, and then my mother worked at Muswell Hill Golf Course, and she was the steward's assistant, and she'd do some cooking and baking. My mother made this incredible fruit cake. Oh my gosh, it was like it was a dream, and she didn't use a lot of alcohol in it. She did a little bit, and she worked at the club, so I would go and meet my mum for after school on certain days of the week. I'd walk from my home in Wood Green to Muswell Hill Golf Course, and I'd meet mum, and we would walk home together. And a little later in life, I started smoking cigarettes when I was probably 12 years old. So a little later on, mum had, she'd give me, it was a motivation to go and meet her because she'd give me a ciggy. Don't tell your dad, she'd say, right? But after the car cleaning, I never did have paper round. It was just the car cleaning, and then I was invited to go and caddy for the club captain, Mr. Marriott, Stan Marriott, 1962. I was 10 years old. And after starting to caddy for him, I really got I wanted to start to play. So Mr. Veach, who was the club steward, who my mum was working for, he said, "Here, I've got a half set of clubs in my office." He said, "Why don't you go out and have a knock? Here's a couple of balls. Here's some tees." In the old days, they were little teeny, like plastic tees, about 1.25 inches long. I mean, nowadays you get these 4-inch long, driving guys with these 4-inch tees. It's like, you're having a laugh. And so he gave me a set, and it was like a 3-wood, and it was a hickory shaft. These are all hickory shafted clubs. I had a 3-wood, a 5-wood, a 7-iron, pitch and wedge putter. I don't know if there was a sand iron in there, maybe a sandy. So off I went, and he gave me this little bag with this half set in, and he said, on one condition, when you go out, don't get in the members' way. If you see a group, go around them, but don't go around them while they're hitting. So I had to learn. I learned etiquette of golf pretty early on.
Right.
Plus the fact that I'd been working with Stan Marriott on the week, I'd do a couple of rounds with him on the weekends. And that was it. That I think if I hadn't had the passion for drumming and I had that passion for golf, because it took a back seat when I started to really get into playing, and I knew that's where I was going to go in my life. That's what I wanted to do. Right. Golf got a second set, and I didn't play golf at all for probably since the caddy days, which was 62, 64, that period of time, until 86, when Dave Murray and I were out playing. We were playing a gig in Canada. We had some time off, and we both decided, let's go and buy some golf clubs and go and have a nap and have a bat, Yeah. And we went into like a Kmart store or something like that up in Canada, whatever it was called. Both of us bought a set of Wilson irons and woods, persimmon heads, right? Sharp, regular steel shafts, bag, shoes, balls, the lot, and we both got the bug. And today we both still love to play. So that's my golf history, if you like.
The amazing thing is just, I think one word there is passion, right? No. So you started playing drums at 10, right? So
well, yeah, I didn't actually start. I didn't have a drum kit until later. I was about 10 and a half. I started, actually it was a little later than that. I started on biscuit tins and anything that made a noise and rattled about, and I'd use my mother's knitting needles as drumsticks, and I did that for about a year and a half, and then they finally I was about 11 and a half, and they bought me a drum set. Previously to that, I had the biggest drum set you could imagine. I had a whole bunch of pots and pans and tins, OXO tins, tobacco tins, Golden Virginia, and if you took the lid off the tin, you got a different sound. So, if you put marbles in it, you kind of had I used to do all kinds of stuff. And I took that kit on tour with me.
Did you really?
I'd take it from my bedroom down to the lounge downstairs. Used to take forever, and if you dropped it.
It was your gig. That was your first gig.
Yeah, I used to take it on the road. And so, hitting the pots and pans and biscuit tins drove my mum up the wall. And she finally, Christmas of 63, it was about Christmas 63, they bought me a drum kit. And it was a John Gray Broadway 3-piece kit. It had a bass drum, a little tom-tom that was, you had a bracket that screwed onto the hoop of the bass drum, a little cymbal on a sucker, no tilter. It was just a little 12-inch cymbal and a snare drum.
Wow.
And I had that kit. I was about 12 years, so I had that when I was 11 and a half, and my first gig I did was at Russell Vale School of Dancing, because my mother made me do ballroom dancing when I was a kid. And so the people said, "Oh, you can come." And I had a mate of mine, Tony Baxter on guitar, and Mike Davidson was the singer. We had one little amplifier. And the guitar player had an acoustic guitar with a pickup over the hole that he plugged into this 10, 15 watt amplifier, and the vocals went through it too. And we did our first gig. It was great. Trouble was, I didn't take a carpet, so every time I hit the bass drum, the thing started sliding across the floor because it was a parquet wood ballroom floor, right? Yeah. So.
So were you guys just in that time period? I mean, that was the real heyday of the launch of the Beatles, the Stones.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
Right, Clapton, because they were all, right, before the Beatles came to the States and everybody kind of came to the Ed Sullivan, right, was prior to 64.
Absolutely right. Yeah, they came to America in 64. They did that Shea Stadium show. And
right, so for you, were you listening to their music?
Yeah, Ringo was my that's my manager, I have to call him, but no, not that one, it's the other one. So my first influence was Joe Morello. I saw him playing, and then my first pin-up was Ringo Starr.
So for you, I'm assuming you've met Ringo, and you know him.
Funnily enough, I only met Ringo for the first time 4 years ago when he played in Fort Lauderdale, the Parker.
Is that right?
Yeah. And a friend of mine had bought tickets he bought 4 tickets, center of the first row at this gig, right? And he said, "Do you think we could get to meet Ringo?" And I said, "Well, Steve Lukather is a good mate of mine, and Greg Bissonette." So I phoned Steve up and I said, "Steve, I'm coming to the show. Is it gonna be possible?" And I've never met Ringo, and Steve Lukather made it possible for us to go backstage before the show and meet Ringo. And we had a great picture and we had a nice chat. And eventually I said to him, I know you've heard this a million times, but I'm a fan. I've heard this a million times as well, but I've got to tell you, when I was 11 years old, I had a picture of you looking over your hi-hat with a big grin. And every night I'd go to bed and I'd look at that picture and say, one of these days I'm going to be doing that. I actually said, one of these days I'm going to have your job. He said, "Oh, bloody hell," And I said to him, "So, you were a massive influence in my life, along with 3 other guys, which I'll get to in a sec." And I said, "So, what cymbals were you using?" I said, "They look like 15-inch hi-hats." And he just looked up at me and he went, "I've got no idea, Nick."
Is that right?
Yeah, he didn't know. I mean, you think about back in the 60s,
right?
People, he had a roadie, he had his Ludwig drum set, his Super Classic, and he probably had a bunch of different cymbals, but they were definitely 15-inch. They were massive, and I said, "You were my first pin-up," and he was really gracious, and it was an endearing moment for me meeting him.
I was going to say, that has to be a great feeling for you with all of your own personal success when you meet someone like that influenced you.
Yeah.
I don't care how long in the future, it was a long time since you were looking up at his photo,
yes,
but it had to be somewhat exciting for you to finally meet him.
No, without a doubt. It was a highlight. And here's the thing, I said to him, the thing I remember about you, I mean, he's left-handed, so he would tend to do these think about the drum fill he was playing a different way to what a right-handed player playing a right-handed kit would do.
Right.
And I said, the thing that got me was when you danced and you didn't play straight on the hi-hat, you swished it like there had been and he'd swish it, and I said I loved that, and you'd be dancing as well as you're playing this side to side on the hi-hat, and like most people would do, like Charlie Watts, he's straight up and down. Right, on his hi-hat. He didn't do that slidey, swishy thing. That was Ringo's thing. And he went, yeah. So, I get it, And I'm in the audience. One of the songs they're playing, I had eye contact. Ringo's looked at it, and I was watching him like a hawk. I mean, Greg Bissonette is a stunning drummer. I mean, I've seen him play loads of times. So, I was more focused on the man. And he played not a lot of drums, but when he did, I was enthralled just watching him, and he just made it so easy. It looked so cool, and he gave the majority of the groove to Greg, but he's looking and he's looked over. He's got his tom-tom, he's got his ride cymbal, he's got a crash over here, crash, a couple of floor toms, and he's looked over at the front row, and I'm looking at him, and he's seen me. He was looking for me, and he went, And he winked at me, and he did the swish, and he did, and I was like, oh my God, that's my wife. She said, yeah, I've seen it. He was looking at me. I said, no, he's looking at me. So it was the most magic moment, not only just meeting him, and, you know, he's such a lovely guy. We didn't really have a lot of time together. We had about 10 minutes, which was too, it went like that, you know, like a freight train.
Who are the other, you said there are other influences.
Yeah, there were 4 guys that I basically, that really influenced my playing. And the next guy was Charlie Watts. Because you're bearing in mind, I'm a teenager, you know, when the Beatles were at their heyday with the Stones. So I was starting to play all their music and soul stuff and Gino Washington's, you know, all these sort of soul bands that were coming out with not just the rock and roll sort of stuff. It was pop music. And
now this is when you were still in school, right? You were still a schoolboy, right?
Yeah. So Charlie Watts was the next guy, and the Stones, you know, because they were the bad boys of pop. If you like, right. The Beatles are nice, clean cut, and, you know, the great songwriting. The Stones were more raunchy and that lovely guitar, you know, and whatnot. And so Charlie was my next guy with Ringo, and then, oh my gosh, can't explain, The Who. When I saw Keith Moon on, there was this live TV show. It was all live stuff. There was no recorded music in those days. You know, it was all live. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And I couldn't believe the dynamic of this. Keith Moon was just the freaking crazy drummer. I mean, he didn't keep a straight groove. He was all over it. Right. You know, he just had this incredible flair across the drum kit, and plus he was an amazing showman. But his playing didn't suffer from his antics when he'd kind of do this thing with his stick, and it was just like acting on the kit. But then he'd rage into this crazy drum fill. It was like, what the heck? Pete Townsend would be, oh God, here he goes, you know. So,
but it's talent. It's just pure talent.
And then of course, John Bonham, you know, came along, and those 3 guys led into John Bonham, and I went, that's where I'm going with my music, because I now come, I'm like 16, 17, getting on into playing blues. I'd moved away from pop, and it was, you know, I had a blues band I joined called the Wells Street Blues Band. It was a 4-piece, and it was a bit of progressive blues. So that music was changing with the likes of The Who and Zeppelin. They, you know, so that kind of built the foundation of my playing. I mean, I'm actually a funk drummer. I used to play a lot of funk in like Blood, Sweat and Tears and Chicago stuff. That was what I was playing, and loved all that you know, big brass sections and whatnot. And so those 4 guys basically, they ran the gauntlet for me, and I didn't base my playing on it. It's just I was influenced so strongly by them. And, you know, then Cream were out at the time, and Ginger Baker, he had that double bass. I mean, Mooney had 2 bass drums, but he didn't play them both. He only had the left one up there to rolled all these tom-toms, you know, because he had like...
How many of these guys did you meet?
I met them all. Well, I met Charlie very briefly. God rest his soul. I met him... I was fortunate enough to see a showcase gig that the Stones did at the 100 Club in Oxford Street. And it was a special event that there were 400 people invited, and I managed to get myself invited through Harvey Goldsmith, who was promoting it. Wow. And in fact, I got into trouble because I took a Walkman in there and I was recording the show. And all of a sudden I get this tap on the shoulder, this big security, oi! Harvey wants to see you. Come here and give me that tape machine. So I'm like, what the frick, you know? So I got into trouble. Harvey he said, why are you recording this? I said, Harvey, you know me. I mean, I'm not going to, would you think I'm going to bootleg the gig? I said, this is for me. This is history. Yeah, seeing the Stones in a small club like 400 seat, that nightclub, in the basement of a club. And he went, you should know better than that, Nick. And he took the cassette out and gave me the machine back.
You're kidding me.
No. I thought, I wish I had another cassette in my pocket. I'd just carry on. Anyway, so I got
you give him a blank one, yeah.
Yeah, I got to say hello to him there, but we didn't really have a conversation. He was like, hello, mate, how you doing? And he was like, yeah, nice to see you. Anyway, Billy Preston was playing keyboards. That was a great night. The stage was like 20 inches off the floor. I mean, you're like almost eye level with everybody, and they were just on fire, and it was so good. Then I met John Bonham at the Roxy LA, which is the little club next door to the Rainbow. And
that's right.
In the Roxy that night, there was Dr. Feelgood were playing. This was back in 76, 70, somewhere about 75, 76. And Zeppelin were out doing it. They were at the end of their American tour.
Wow.
And I got an invite to go to see Dr. Feelgood playing. And Zeppelin were big fans of Dr. Feelgood. And so they were in the VIP section, and there was a balcony in the Roxy Theatre. And I managed to get myself up there, and I thought, great, I'm finally going to get to say hello to John Bonham. Right? So I plopped myself down. He's sitting there with his bowler hat on, like this. Like, out, gone. And I've gone, oi, mate, how you doing? I nudged him. Well, I can't swear, but he swore at me. And he was very, very drunk. He was having a good night. And I thought, I ain't going to disturb him anymore. So I didn't. I thought, right, okay, at least I've said hello to him. Right?
Exactly.
Now, a couple of days later, I was flying back to London because I was out playing with a band called Streetwalkers, and it was the end of our tour. We'd finished and we were heading home. And I was on the same flight, the British Airways flight. Now, in those days, it was first class and economy. There was no club class or premium economy. It was one and done. Up the front or in the back. I was like 3 rows back from the anyway, long story short, I ended up going up to the first class on Jimmy Page's invite and Planty. And I thought, great, I'm going to get to see John and have a natter to him and tell him how much I loved him and how much a great influence he was on my playing, right? He's in the front row, Peter Grant's sitting next to him, and he's like this. God, right? And I said,
same position. He assumed the same position.
No, he didn't have his bowler hat on. And I turned around and I said to Robert, I said, yeah, Bob, I said, can I wake him up? And he went, best not. And then Granty heard me because I was sitting on the arm of the first class.
Right.
And actually, finally, the stewardess came out and says, you got to go back to your seat. You can't be sitting here,
Yeah.
They gave me about half an hour with them. But Granty heard and he went, ugh, don't even think about it. Something like that. And I thought, bollocks. And that was the only 2 times I was in his company. I got told to F off by him, which was great. I didn't
Typical.
take offense. I didn't even take the bait. I was just enamored by the fact that he'd actually woken up and told me to F off. And you know what? There was somebody asked me if you had the chance to see one band that you never saw live, who would it be? And it would be Zeppelin, because I never got to see them live. And all the years,
Were they in your opinion, the most talented of all the groups?
Without a doubt, until Deep Purple, definitely. Until when Purple came along, it was like that was another level. Byrne was just, me and Pacey's drumming with that. Then I'm thinking, well, he's a lefty. He's playing the wrong kind of drum set. It's all round the back the front, But you're going to listen to the way he plays and the way he interpreted all those songs from the early days, and even today, he's still a stunning player. But Zeppelin were in my opinion, that first real progressive rock band. They were blues based, and what I loved about them more than anything else was the way that you'd hear live performances of them, and they would never play the song the same twice. There would be a complete like jam session, and then when Moby Dick solo, it was yeah. So yeah, they were a massive influence on me, mate.
For you had some, like I'd say, education to be right. You studied to be an engineer, correct?
I did, yeah. I went. My mum, my father managed the band that I was in, the band that I talked about earlier, Wells Street Blues Band. I joined them when I was like 14, 15. And we morphed into a band called The Axe, spelled AX. And my father managed it. My family were very musical based. There was always jazz being played in my house. It's funny. You'd think I'd be a jazz drummer, wouldn't you?
With all of that influence.
My mum's favourite was Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole. My dad was George Shearing, Betty Goodman, all these guys, Duke Ellington. Big band stuff. So he used to play trumpet, my dad, and my mum played a bit of piano. And very rarely did I ever hear her play tinkle the ivories. But anyway, they encouraged me. My father ended up managing this band, so it was getting. We were semi-pro. We were making some money. We bought our own van. We bought a 1500 Ford 1500 weight van. It wasn't a transit, pre-transit vans. Anyway, Mum said, my dad was encouraging. He said, "Oh, you're bloody good drummer, son. Keep it up. Anyway, pardon me. So, Mum, one night I was originally going to stay on at school and take A levels, and I was getting about. I was 15 and a half, and I had to make this decision whether I was going to stay on for the 5th year of my high school teaching and learning. And I said, you know what, I'm going to leave and turn pro. My mum said, no, you're not. You're going to get a trade. I said, well, what do you think music is? She said, well, you know, it's fickle. You need to have a trade to fall back on. Ain't that right, Harry? My dad was like, yeah, your mum's got a point, son. Anything for a quiet life. Right?
It's practical, right? They're being practical.
But they were, but my dad always put a little twist of a nuance of a sexual, in what's the word I'm looking for? Innuendo.
Innuendo.
Anything for a quiet life. But he agreed. And I said to my mum, I said, all right, I'll look into a career with what we called an indenture, an apprenticeship. And I originally wanted to go into carpentry because I was really good at woodwork at school. Metalwork was a second. And my first job when I left school at 15 and a half was working for a contractor called Stocks, S-T-O-X. And this company had me filling in cement trenches, foundation trenches. Nothing to do with carpentry at all. So that lasted 2.5 days. It was middle of the summer. It was, it wasn't. It was because I didn't go straight away into working. I kind of hovered around for a few months. It was like more autumn into winter, and it was quite cold in the mornings and wet. So I told him, I said, I'm not having that. And then I got home, my mum was like, well, what are you going to do? I said, I think I might go into engineering, mechanical craft practice is what we called it. Not engineering like heavy stuff. But anyway, so I ended up working with a company that made bottle manufacturing. And I worked in the workshop because it's all cast iron molds and stuff that to make glass, bottles and jam jars and stuff like that. So I worked there, and one of the charge hands I got on really well with him. He said, I think we should send you to college 1 day a week, 2 nights. We'll pay for it, but you have to see it through for 4 years. And at the end of it, you get what's called a City and Guild certificate, which is like a diploma. And I went, all right, so, okay. And I worked with them for about 2 years. Then I changed to a plastic injection molding. Then I worked with a die-cast company making die-cast little toys, dinky toys. So I had a lot of experience with different materials, but still in the same vein. And I went to school 1 day a week, 2 nights. A lot of the nights I didn't go because I was doing gigs. So I was holding the job down and playing shows during the week, and definitely the weekend. Weekends weren't a problem, you know. So I ended up getting through my last year. I got a distinction grade. Past that, and funny enough, the day I gave up my last job that I worked at was a company called Zales, Z-A-L-E-S. I was working on making cup generator anemometers, and I had to work with mercury, which was really tough because you have to be very careful because that's real super poisonous. And the actual thermometer, if you like, that was measuring the heat and humidity temperatures had to be filled with mercury. Anyway, have a long story. I'll make it even longer if you like. So, so I gave up because I was working with these 2 songwriters, and they said, "We'll give you 50 quid a week. You come and you can drive the band van, because these other 2 guys didn't have a license." So I thought, 50 quid a week. Oh, and I'll get the van, right? So I went home, and my mum said, "What are you doing home?" I said, well, funny enough. She said, "Oh, hang on a minute, this came for you. This is no word of a lie." And she gave me the envelope from the City and Guilds people. And I went, "Hold on, Mum." And I opened it up. Passed with distinction. Oh, okay, la-di-da, all these other figures and numbers. And she said, "What are you doing home?" I said, "Here, Mum, that's for you." Oh, she's gone, "Oh, I'm ever so proud," and give me a big hug. She said, "Now what are you doing home?" I said, "As of this minute, I'm now a professional musician. You wait till your father gets home," was the first thing she said. And I said, "Why?" She said, you can't just come in," and she was in shock because I'd given up my job. And,
right.
And it was the weirdest timing because that letter had arrived that morning, the day I'd left the job, and I was going pro with these 2 guys, regardless of whether I'd passed or not.
Right.
I'd made my mind up. I was 21 years old, and that was me done. So fortunately enough, I had the certificate from that I gave to my mum and the letter.
At that point in your career as a startup musician, was there any specific niche of rock or blues that you saw yourself turning into? In other words, you saw yourself going down this path. I'm going to be this kind of a musician. Well, did you make up your mind, or it didn't matter?
It's a good question. I hadn't sort of, because I was playing in the blues band, and we had the acts, and I'd met these 2 singer-songwriters that I went to pro with, and they were kind of a very poppy sort of middle of the road, bit progressive, but they were songwriters, and they worked for a company called April Music. They both came out of bands, and they were both super talented, and we were going to form a band, and that was the idea. So it was Mike Leslie vocals and guitar, Billy Day keyboards and vocals. This guy taught me so much about harmony and melody on a piano, and he taught me how to hear harmonies and whatnot. I don't do that now, but I did a lot of that back in my early studio career. So what happens is these. So I was a session player for 2 years. I made my living going recording sessions, demo stuff, and all kinds of stuff, pop. So I was a prostitute of music.
But it's an apprentice, right? Because it gave you the ability.
You paid, I play. And I didn't read music. I went to a couple of sessions. I played with a guy called Clem Catini. He was a massive studio player way back. He's like a Steve Gadd of England.
Wow.
Drummer, he was that popular, and we did this session, the pair of us, and there was 2 drum sets, and Pete Morgan on bass, who was an incredible bass player. He had a band called the Morgan James Duo, a bit jazzy, but anyway, the MD came in and he got drums too out on the top. He gave me this piece of music, and I'm like, Clem. And I put it on the floor, Tom. And the guy says, you need to stick that on your music stand. And I'm like, why? So I had an ability to hear a piece of music once, and 9 times out of 10 I could play it. If I hadn't got the bits right, I'd hear it second time. So we'd do a run through, and I'd count the bars. And I could see on my music, I was like 32 bars down the line. There was a 4-bar drum break, drums 2. 4 bars before that, or a couple of bars before that, no, it might be more than 32, I don't know, was Clem. And we did these drum trade-offs for 4 or 5 bars, whatever the amount of bars were. And we did this thing, and I completely messed it up. And the MD taps the music stand. Right. He's conducting this whole band in there, right? Oi, drums 2, coda 2, so and so. And I'm like, what are you on about? He said, what's written down there? I said, you got me, mate. I've no idea. He said, I take it you don't read. And he got pissed off with the director, with the producer in the control room, saying he wanted readers for the session. And I said, look, just let me play it one more time. We'll get it right. Don't worry. And I nailed it. So those situations were great learning curve for me, and I did all kinds of sessions, folk music, didn't do any classical, but folk, pop, a little rock and roll here and there. I worked for a company called Young Blood Records, which was they do library music, and we go in and do these sessions and record other people's songs without vocals, and they would buy them from this company. It's library. Wow. So yeah. I was still influenced more with soul music. I loved funk. I loved that groove of playing, and I moved into this band. That my first touring band was a band called Streetwalkers, and they were kind of a very progressive band. Roger Chapman was on vocals, a guy called Charlie Whitney on guitar, and they had a band prior to that called Family that had quite a huge success in Europe. Didn't really break the ice in America, but did some great albums. Anyway, I worked with these guys, and there was a guitar player called Bobby Tench who came out of Humble Pie and Jeff Beck.
Right, I was going to say, that's a pretty good name right there.
Yeah, so I worked with these great musicians, and it kind of took I played more funk grooves and more soul, because the bass player was bass up here like Mark King, real funky bass player. And so that was the beginning of playing. I had the blues band that we were playing more like Zeppelin and doing jams. So I got this freedom of playing through the band The Axe.
Right.
Then I went into sessions for a couple of years. Then I met Streetwalkers, and that's where my drumming career really took off.
Had different freedom.
Yeah, and then I started, I worked with Pat Travers in 76, 77.
What was that experience like?
Well,
with Pat?
that was the real foundation of where I took my playing from, all the influences of prior to, learning curve and everything else through the sessions and my heroes, if you like.
Right.
And playing with Pat was a 3-piece.
Right.
So I had a lot of scope to embellish, and my drumming style became more of a drumming percussionist, rather than a Charlie and a Ringo that were just playing straight time to keep the groove for the band, and likewise with the soul and funk stuff. There's not a lot of big drum fills. You don't play across the bars when people play, whatever. 3-piece is completely different.
Right, you're just as important
because you got to fill it up. Yep. So that was where my plus the fact that Pat was a great blues player, but he was also very progressive. I did 2 albums with him, and then that sort of was where going back to your question, that was when I realised, and I was hitting the drums hard. I was a hard player in those days, and I was one of these guys who wanted to break everything. Which is not why, you do sacrifice the sound of the drum set when you hit it too hard.
Right.
When you play quietly or less aggressive, the drums have more time to do what they're supposed to do.
I work out every morning. First I spin, then run, then lift. So I try to stay proactive, keeping my body fueled and hydrated. Making hydration a priority can help us feel healthier in our everyday lives. 1 stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than just plain water. I take my Liquid IV first thing in the morning as a pre-workout drink. I like the easy-to-use packages. Lemon ginger is my favorite flavor to power down every morning. Most importantly, Liquid IV is non-GMO and free from gluten and dairy and soy. Grab your Liquid IV in bulk at Walgreens, where you can get 15% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code PATH at checkout. That's 15% off anything you order when you shop. Better hydration today using promo code PATH at liquidiv.com. Well, the astounding thing, you go from in that time period too, right, was say with the long-standing band that you're with today, they were kind of, kicking it around too with some success, but everything has a reason, right? Every nuance brings people together like an ebb and flow of a river. And for you, how did you meet the guys from Iron Maiden?
That's quite a good question as well. The first time I met Maiden, I actually met Rod Smallwood, their manager, in 1975, right? So Rod Smallwood and I go back prior to Iron Maiden.
Wow.
Rod was the tour manager and a manager for Cockney Rebel. And Cockney Rebel, Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel, big A, I forget the hit, they had a bunch of hits in the middle of the 70s. Anyway, we did a show with them in New York at the Bottom Line Club, and we supported, Streetwalker supported, and that's when I first met Rod. So bearing that in mind, as we go down another 4 years, 1979, into 78, 79, Rod was in the studio. I was doing a session with a guy called Beethoven. I was still doing some odd sessions here and there, so it wasn't one and done for 2 years. So, and I was in the studio. It was Polar. Was it Polar Studios? No, that's in Sweden. Anyway, Phil Wayman owned this studio, and in one of the other rooms was a girl called Gloria Gaynor.
Sure.
And Rod was managing her, and the bass player, the bass player, Steve. Not Steve Harris, this other guy, I forget his surname, Steve, came into my studio. I'm in the other room next door, just heard you're here. Come and say hello. We got Rod Smallwood in here, he's the manager. I went, okay, I know Rod, I'll be in a bit. So I've gone, Nicky, how you doing? Bloody great to see you. And we're sitting talking, and he said, you've ever heard of a band called Iron Maiden? I went, as it happens, I've seen the name in the Melody Maker. They're doing really well at the bit. Bloody great. I've just started to manage it. Bloody mum, you should come and check them out. So that was my first introduction to Iron Maiden through Rod in the studio. I was sitting in the studio. Anyway, I ended up working with a guy called Donovan McKitty. God rest his soul. He passed away 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a bit longer than that. Terrific guitar player. He was a Jimi Hendrix reincarnation, except for he was right-handed. Well, actually, he was left-handed. Jimi Hendrix was right-handed. Contrary to belief, this hand does all the work. What's that?
Yeah, right hand.
It's right hand, isn't it? So, what was Jimmy doing? All this. What does this do?
It's all left-handed, right?
Like all the guys in Maiden. And this Donovan McKee, he's a left-handed guitar player. I don't care what you say. He's left-handed. He's not fucking right. This one just plucks the strings, and sometimes you don't even have to do that. You go, you don't even have to touch them. Anyway, I digress. So there's Donovan McKee, three-piece again. Charlie Tumahite. We had a different bass player, a Neil Brazilian fella. I forget his surname. Anyway, he lasted a few months. We brought Charlie Tumahite in, and then we got a show in Brussels, just outside Brussels in Belgium. It was an indoor festival, and Iron Maiden were special guests to. Then it was supposed to be Judas Priest, and we were on like 4 or 5 bands down. It was an indoor festival, and it was Iron Maiden's very first European gig that they ever did. Wow. And I'm on the same bill with them. So Steve Harris is standing on the side of the stage, which he does to this very day. Whatever the support band is playing with Maiden, he'll always go and stand on the side of the stage. Maybe not for the whole show, but he goes up at least for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. If sometimes he'll go out to the mixer to see the band playing. Really? Yeah, puts his hair up. Oh, I shouldn't say that because everybody's going to see this bloke with his hair up and that and go, oh, yes, Harris. So, anyway, he's standing on the side of the stage. We're playing. Now, Charlie Tumahite used to play in a band called Bebop Deluxe. And Bebop Deluxe was one of Steve Harris's favourite bands because of the bass player, Charlie Tumahite, who was on stage with me and Donovan. So we're doing this song. Donovan's amp blows up. We didn't have a spare amp, and we were just a support band. You know, we didn't carry spares like you would when you're touring. Right. So we're carrying on playing, me and Charlie, and Don's gone up to his amp. There's smoke coming out of it, and he's gone up to them. Oh, I've just blown up my amp. He's gone. So Charlie and I, instead of stopping, we improv'd a solo. Wow! And we went into this like funk groove. You know, we didn't stop. We were playing a song, and I just changed the groove, and he went solo. Off he went, something like that, and then going quiet and cross stick, and he's off. Then it was my turn, and in those days I was, a fiend for drum solos. Well, I've got to do a drum solo, whatever. And off I went. Off I'm going. Little drum set. I didn't have it. I had my big kit. I had my Sonar, my big tom-toms. Off I've gone. Harry's on the side of the stage. Right? He remembered that.
And he's watching you do your big solo.
Then the other thing he remembered was the big argument that we had backstage after the show. Because poor old Charlie Tumahite was a bit of a drinker. And Harry thought I had the argument, but it was between Donovan and Charlie. And Charlie actually threw a fucking bottle at Donovan, who was sitting in a caravan, because we had caravan dressing rooms. Be porter cabins today, but then we didn't have porter cabins. We used their caravans. He threw, and it went through the window and smashed the back window of this caravan. Harry, to this day, well, not to this day, because he knows I've told him the story, it wasn't me. He said, because I sworn it was you, Nick. I said, no. But here's the thing. So when later on, a couple of 3 years down the line, when things weren't going so well for Clive, the first person that he thought of was me. Wow. From seeing the improv solo that Charlie and I did. And that was how I basically got the gig. So my first meeting with Iron Maiden, plus that night I hung out with the guys. And
so it's serendipitous because
yes,
if he didn't blow the amp, you're playing the normal gig.
Right, so the government's gone, right, you'll have a bit of that, we'll blow his amp and you fire up. Right, you're going to do a solo. Later on, you're going to work with that fella and you're going to have 40 years with him. Right? Yeah,
I was going to say, that was like the first date. Yeah, right? For a big time long marriage.
Jesus, thank you so much. Really, what a blessing. Who'd have thought? And you know what? People say you got to be in the right place at the right time. Now, that is very, very true. That is you've got to sometimes work at getting yourself in that right place. Now, you say, well, how do you know you're in the right place? Well, you have to make sure that you cover all the bases. You dot the T's and you cross the I's. All right?
For you, tell me, if you had to define the difference between progressive music and heavy metal music.
Well, progressive music is more, in my book, Maiden is a progressive rock band. We're labelled as heavy metal, but when you go back to the late 70s or the mid 70s when the band was formed, Steve formed the band 76, 75 actually. So with the kind of progression, it's with different time changes and different inflections, with different feels. Now, heavy metal is more heavier. Like if you take a song like Iron Maiden, that's more heavy metal than a song like The Klansman.
Right.
You take The Trooper, it's a straight down the line, galloping rock song. That's like a heavy metal anthem. Whereas you go back to songs like To Tame a Land or 22 Acacia Avenue, that is more progressive. Well, maybe not 22. Murders in the Rue Morgue from way back in late 70s of Iron Maiden. That's progressive to me. Now, heavy metal's more heavy groove and more groove to the feel. Whereas, although we don't go into ad-lib jam sessions when there's a guitar solo, it's a structured solo. But it's still, to me, progressive in the way and the feel of the way the song's been written. Heavy metal is, to me, a little bit more straight down the line, grungy, not the speed metal stuff. Heavy metal is like the real riffy, so it's a fine line. Everybody really, putting music into bags like that. I've always said that we're a progressive hard rock band.
Right.
Hard rock being like what Zeppelin were. They were a hard rock, progressive blues band. Because they were playing loud and with amplification. When you go back to the 60s, they didn't have PA systems that you put microphones in front of cabinets.
That's
or
right.
The eyes and stuff. The only reason that they mic drum kits up were because the guitar players were turning up to 10.
I mean, if the Beatles had Helter Skelter with the amplification that they have today, that would be a loud song.
Progressive metal, mate.
Right? I mean, think about it. You never would say, because to your point, you would never say the Beatles are a heavy metal or a progressive band.
No.
They're progressive for their time, but not in today's world. But for me,
it's a page of history. That these genres have been written and labelled, pigeonholed, if you like. I don't really. I got into some serious trouble in South America a number of years ago with Rod. I was so fed up with people saying you're a heavy metal band.
Right.
And I said, no, we're a progressive rock band. We're a hard rock band. We're not progressive. We're out the 70s. If we were formed in the 80s, 85 to 90s, maybe you could say we were metal because of the style of writing. But then, a lot of the songs that are written are progressive songs. They really are. They're not straight down the line. It's like half a dozen time changes in some of the songs and stuff. Plus the fact we don't really write a lot of songs that are less than 10 minutes in length.
I was going to say, so then for you, when you're listening as things progressed from the 70s into the 80s, and then in the 80s, I would say from, 81, Maiden... And when you joined in 82, that was kind of the time period of MTV's success.
Oh, right.
I mean, today,
absolutely.
MTV is not music, but at that point, there was pop music. There was the Madonna look, MTV made Madonna. Madonna could say, I made MTV. It's a great marriage.
I think the first band that was on it was Def Leppard, if I'm not mistaken. I mean,
correct. And so when I look at it and go Def Leppard and Maiden, you guys brought different culture to the pop culture, right?
Well,
so
it was labeled pigeonholed again, new wave of British heavy metal. You know, it was the
right.
you know, even the Leps were you know, Def Leppard, not Led Zeppelin, were pigeonholed in that kind of category. I mean, we did shows together in the 80s. We did shows with the Scorpions, and you know, there was this genre again. It was changing. You know, music is an ever progression of change,
right?
Of style of technique and sound. And you know, look where we're at now with all this digitization stuff, and people sitting on a computer, making concertos and stuff. You know, and they're not really. There is a talent there because they hear it in their head and they put it on a keyboard.
Right. Well, that's what producers today can, or these DJs, right? DJs become musicians because they can work a computer.
Yeah, look, but here's the thing: the guys that are doing those spinny things, there's a talent there. I mean, they've learned how to use that particular technology, and that takes a talent. Now, if you said to him, right, you know, you got that beat, go play it.
No chance.
Now, if he says to me, do it, you play it on that.
So you can
no chance.
No chance. So, you know, there's a two-way street, you know, so
it's a talent.
I can't take away the talent that's required from somebody be able to create that but, you know, if he's on his own, he's not in a band, he don't have bandmates to turn around and blame, especially the drummer. Oi, what happened in so-and-so? And you go, I think you hit a bum call. No, you did, you know. Listen.
What about the labeling for you when you're listening to these folks and they talk about the hair bands of the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, that was, you know, that was a genre of music. That was a visual characterization, you know, like with the bouffant hairstyle and the spandex pants. You know, we used to wear spandex, you know. I used to have lightning bolts on spandex onesies, you know. I wonder where they went. Oh, we're worth a few bob now, weren't they? You know, yeah. I mean, the thing is, there was a whole marketing machine behind genres of music in the 80s and 90s, right? Which you don't have now. You don't have pieces of vinyl, and you don't have record companies giving you $250,000 record advance to go make an album and then rip you off, you know. But that was the genre. That was the way the music industry worked, you know. And some people would be able to break a band if they had enough money behind it, and there was an A&R guy that had enough passion behind it to say, I can break these guys. And you know, their hair bands were, you know, well, I mean, you know, Striper were a hair band, you know, they were a Christian band. They kind of got a lot of grief. They were a great band. I think Michael Sweet's still out there, I think, doing it.
For you, the evolution of Maiden and its duration today, to your point, money is made in the music industry based on touring. And most people would still say Maiden could arguably be one of the top, still today, top live bands.
Well, yeah, we are, without a doubt.
Right. I mean, so by experiencing a Maiden show and doing it live in today's genre of music where you make money, all those other iterations of hair bands, synthesized bands, all those things have its niche.
Right.
But it comes back now to, if you want to make money, a live band that can actually have a body of work like Maiden. Yes. With all of your albums, you can pick and choose different stuff. You want to push out the new music, but you also can give the fan base what they want, which are the classics that they grew up to. And
yeah, you know, the thing is, the longevity of Maiden, you know, okay, I have my old man, he says, son, you can't polish a turd, right? Now, you can't give a band success if they ain't any good.
That's right.
You can, or you could way back. You could kind of fudge it. You could have the Milli Vanilli scenario. You could have that kind of crap going on where you lip sync to a backing track and all that bullshit, But you still have to have the ingredients to work on, and build around to create such a thing. Now, Maiden's body of work is classic. It's it started off with Iron Maiden album Killers, and then on from there, and classic songwriting, great performance. That when people go, I want to go see that band. I've heard they're good. I've heard their album. I want to see that live, and they come and see it, and they go, wait a minute, that's better live than the album.
That's right.
Or they play that slower on the record, but I like it faster, or whatever. And then they see the show, and they get in. Iron Maiden we've always put on a show for us.
Just to give a perspective of the success of your work and Maiden's work together in your marriage of 40 years, there's been a lot of current artists and artists that have come and gone that were influenced by whether it be your drumming or Maiden and the type of music and the lyrics and the way that Maiden performs, right? I mean, give me just artists that have come to your shows and said how much Maiden has influenced you. I mean, that is a legendary comment.
Oh yeah, that's the best accolade you can ever be. You can never be given is when people say, you made me pick up a pair of sticks. You're the first guy that like when I saw Joe Morello playing in, Dave Brubeck's band, that's why I wanted to pick up a pair of sticks. I saw him and went, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And when people
any current younger artist,
I saw you playing. My first time I ever saw a show was at your so-and-so gig, or I saw your video of Live After Death from 1985, and it possessed me to go and play drums. And they've gone then, and they're professional players, and that beautiful accolade from your peers. And it's wonderful when kids come up and say, oh, you're my favorite drummer, or, how did you do this? How did you do that? What's it like playing with this band? What's it, that's still amazing. But when you get people come up and say, you influenced me, that first album, I first heard Where Eagles Dare, I knew I wanted to do it and be a drummer.
For you in particular, you also have put kind of a different charge into rock and roll musician, where you've been married for a long time.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people have gotten through a lot of iterations. What's your secret? If you had to say the secret of your artistry with Iron Maiden may have one mindset for you, for Niko, to do this. What made your marriage work?
Listen, we've had moments where we've divorced for a while, believe it or not. Well, that's simple, really. It's to do the best possible job that you can at that given time. It's like when we do a new album, we go in and we don't think and rest our success on the laurels of preceding albums. Right, we go in and we make the best music that we put. That focus is that we're going to do the best that we can. It's the way Steve writes the songs, whoever brings a song into the band, the way we construct the songs and work. The marriage has worked for 40 years. Yes, we've had bumps in the road. We've had arguments. We've had times where we feel like, we shouted at one another and thrown stuff across the room, not at each other, but, it's like your marriage to your fella or your wife. It's a love-hate relationship. But the thing is, we have more love for one another, and what we do in the passion. The passion is still there. People say, "How can you be your age going out doing what you're still doing?" How do you do it? That's how I do it. Through prayer, first of all. Knowing that it really has, because I'm 70 years old and I'd go out and drive these guys. I mean, I'm flipping old Bruce is the baby. He's 6 years younger. Oh, my Lord. It's, if we didn't have that passion as a band of brothers, if you like, to do what we do the way we do it, then it wouldn't be for this incredible career. We love to, Steve. I got to take me out of to Harry because he has the drive and passion to keep everything focused on what we don't lose focus on what the primary goal of Iron Maiden is to go out, the six of us, and freaking kill it on stage every night. And it's not. I think that to go back to the reasons of why the marriage works is because we do it for one another. We don't do it for the fans, although we do. The primary goal is that the six of us are in that bubble on stage. Although we involve it because without the audience, we'd be playing an empty hall, which we could do because we still love playing. When we rehearse, we don't have kids sitting in the audience in the room rehearsing. We're playing for us, right? And we make sure that that's first and foremost what we're doing. Yes, of course, when we get on stage, we got like 30,000, 3,000, 300. We could have 30 kids in that audience, and it wouldn't make a difference to the way that we perform because we're performing collectively for each other. You get my drift? So that's where that's the I think the essence of any great band. Not just we've been
for you guys. Has there been a time limit that you say, you know what, when we hit this, let's just call?
No, not at all. We've never said we're going to make this the last tour. We're going to do a farewell tour. There's no such thing as a farewell tour as we know. You can look at The Who, you can look at the main culprits behind this. Are two bands that come straight to mind. It's Kiss and Motley Crue.
Right.
Did they not sign a contract 5 years ago or something? This is definitely the last tour we're doing. What are they doing at the minute? They're out there with the Leps and Joan Jett and everybody. Bless
exactly.
You can't say never am I going to, let's make this a farewell tour. Look, I can understand sometimes people will put their hands in their pockets from a business perspective, curriculum of it, and go, well, we're going to do a farewell tour. So somebody who's sitting back for, I'll catch them on the next tour or maybe on the new album, if they do a new album. Right? And then somebody turned around and said, right, we're going to make this the last tour. They'll put their hand in their pocket just to go and see their favourite member of the band play one more time for them.
That's right.
And then what happens? 2 years later, they go, oh, we're going out for the farewell tour. But come on. We won't do that. If we ever said farewell, it would be farewell. But we're not going to because we are of the opinion, yes, of course, we've got to kind of calm down the schedule of the tour. And that's hard to do because the production is so expensive to run every week with the amount of people that work, and we love that. We put on great shows. It costs a lot of money to do that. We're not a Rammstein. We don't have that massive production that they have. A Rammstein, I should say. I don't know if you can say Rammstein. Ooh. Anyway, politically incorrect. So, we to try and say we'll only do 4 shows a week against 5, there's an extra, we've got to take care of all the crew to put, whatever, the logistics or something like that. So we have to balance that out.
Right.
And say, well, how can we still go out, make the money to pay for the show and also come out of it with some money in our own pockets. Right? And,
makes perfect sense.
To be honest with you, the way that the money kind of generated to keep this band functioning on the downtime as well, especially 2 years of COVID,
right,
is merchandise. that is a big earner for Iron Maiden because, as you know, the Iron Maiden Eddie was a brilliant strategy from Rod, and the logo. As soon as you see Iron Maiden, you don't have to see Eddie. You know it is. Exactly. You have people that see other people with that font, which is public domain, by the way. Metal Lord font, I think it's called. You know,
did Alan Aldridge?
What's that all about?
Did Alan Aldridge do that logo or no? I'm trying to remember.
No, I think Derek Riggs did it.
Okay.
I'm not sure who. When Rod came up with,
I remember Alan. What a lovely guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know who you're talking about actually.
Alan did the Rolling Stones. I know he did the Tongue. He did the.
Oh, okay.
He also did. He worked with Zeppelin. I know he worked with the Hard Rock.
Right.
He created the guitar for the Hard Rock, and then the House of Blues. He created their logo too.
Oh, okay. I don't think I'm
because I remember he did album covers and he did logos.
So Derek Riggs did all the artwork. He did from way back, and now I'm not sure if he actually created the Iron Maiden,
right
font and red letters.
That's an awesome
around or whatever.
Whomever did it.
Actually,
it was awesome.
That's something I need to check out because that's embarrassing. Because actually, who came up with the font on Iron Maiden? In fact,
I think it's cool to know. I mean, because it's so nostalgic.
Yeah, I worked with a guy back in the 70s called Gordon Giltrap. Did an album for him, and he had a song called "Fear of the Dark." Funny enough, on an album that had that font on it.
Really?
Before Iron Maiden, yeah. And in fact, David Bowie had something on one of his albums in that font prior to Iron Maiden. See, it wasn't like it's shouldering the responsibility now of that kind of. You can't patent a font, I don't believe, but you can. I think we could trademark Iron Maiden's logo because it's so popular and it's part of us.
Right, and it's been publicized using that logo, so you can
say, "Oh, well, patent Iron Maiden's logo," because it's an whatever. I may be wrong, but I should find out. Actually, I'll ask Rob when I see him next week.
I would like that. That'd be interesting to find out.
Actually, did the font,
the logo?
Yeah.
Niko, thank you. I was going to say thank you so much for
mate, really
kind of visiting. It's been long overdue.
It has, mate.
For us, it's just a good excuse to just visit face to face, even if it's on a Zoom, just to visit, and then we have to get out there and chase the little golf ball.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm really looking forward to doing something together, Scott, and maybe we can get together for the upcoming North American tour.
I would love that.
Yeah, we've got a couple of shows in California, so you're over in San Diego.
I would love. Let's stay in touch. I want to come. When you come out, we'll play golf no matter where. We'll make that time.
That I have to have a day off. So I don't play day of the show. I mean, I'm not like. My dear friend Alice, he'll get up, he'll drive overnight and get the first tee time the next day of the show.
Every day.
Now of course, he's a little bit older than me, not by a lot, but yeah, he's, so he has a siesta during the afternoon. But I can't, I daren't play day of the show because it wears me out.
Right.
And I like to do a lot of walking on the course. I do drive, but I like
you want to experience it and have fun.
Absolutely. So, hey, Scott, thanks so much for having me on your show, and we will see each other very soon.
Indeed. Stand by.
All right, my old love. God bless you and all you lot out there.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to write us on thepathhere.com to have one of your questions featured on a future episode. You can follow me on Instagram @ScottSavlo. If you want to send us a tweet or follow us on Instagram, it's @thepathhere podcast. Hey, I'm Scott Savlov, and you've been listening to The Path Here.